tonight, doubling down on deplorables.
I simply refuse to believe that America's greatness is a thing of the past.
President Biden back in Normandy today, honoring the fallen while once again targeting his political rival. Is preaching a threat to democracy, changing any minds? Adding up, hiring is strong, but Americans aren't feeling optimistic about the economy.
They are systematically pushing the middle class out, and we need to stand up and hold these politicians accountable.
The truth about what needs to change. And beating the system. The super rich beat taxes, now they want to beat death. Peter Diomedes on whether $120,000 a year will buy him the fountain of youth. All right, we made it. We made it to Friday, and with that, we welcome you to the fairest show on television. First night, what Joe Biden did not say at Normandy. Oftentimes, what politicians don't say is the most important. Biden's speech contained two unsaid, but at the same time, unmistakable messages. First one, the real threat to democracy is what I want to talk about, but can't. For Joe Biden, that's Donald Trump. Number two, Joe Biden wanted to say what he said in the past. Trump supporters are threats to democracy who are betraying the boys of Pointe du Hoc. The White House advisors and comms folks, they got what they wanted today. They called today Mr. Biden's Gipper moment. This was the side-by-side of them. Biden and Reagan, 40 years apart at Pointe du Hoc, one of the more sacred places in American history, on the windswept cliffs where Army Rangers climbed to begin the liberation of Europe.
I refuse to believe, I simply refuse to believe that America's greatness is a thing of the past. I still believe there's nothing beyond our capacity in America when we act together. We're the fortunate heirs of a legacy of these heroes.
From the Washington Post, later in his speech, he, meaning Mr. Biden, suggested that the ghosts of the 225 men, all of whom have since died, were calling on today's Americans to confront modern-day challenges of isolationism, bigotry, and democratic backsliding. We've heard those words before somewhere, right? Maybe in 2016. Things were pretty good in America back then. Hillary Clinton promised 4 more years of Obama and Biden, and called Trump a racist, homophobic, misogynistic, isolationist, xenophobic bigot who grabbed women by their whatevers and claimed he would get us into wars. Here's how Clinton and Obama back then described Trump supporters.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
And they feel so betrayed by government.
So it's not surprising then that they get bitter. They cling to guns or religion.
The result in 2016 was that Donald Trump won. 2024, Democrats say Trump is even more evil than before. And his supporters, Trump supporters in the eyes of Democrats, are almost akin now, as they describe it, almost as Hillary Clinton tweeted about it today, they're akin to Nazis.
They're asking us to do our job, to protect freedom in our time, to defend democracy, to stand up aggression abroad and at home.
A poison is running through our democracy and parts of the extreme press. Truth buried by lies.
Trump's assault on democracy isn't just part of his past. It's what he's promising for the future.
What, in your view, constitutes the primary threat to freedom and democracy at home?
Donald Trump. Seriously.
All right. And look, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but Joe Biden is running again for president. And this time around, Joe Biden promises 4 more years of Joe Biden. Some people feel they're better off. Some people feel they're worse off. It's just the way it is. This time, though, he calls Trump an election-denying threat to democracy, as well as a racist, homophobic, misogynistic, isolationist, xenophobic bigot who grabbed women by their whatever, and says he will get us into wars. Plus, says the people who support Donald Trump are betraying the heroes of Normandy. Then he adds that Trump is a convicted felon. The polling shows, though, that this is not working. In Georgia, a Quinnipiac poll showed Trump's convictions post-Trump's convictions. 23% more likely to vote Trump, 22% less likely to vote for Trump, 54% said it makes no difference. So Trump net gained a point. And in a state that could be decided by a few thousand votes, that's huge. With us now, Lauren Wright, Associate Research Scholar, a lecturer in politics at Princeton University, Scott Bolden, NewsNation contributor and former chairman for the D.C. Democratic Party. Nice to see both of you. Scott, is it okay if ladies go first?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
I had a good upbringing.
There you go. You did indeed. I will agree with you. Lauren, in the past modern history of the presidencies, has anybody ever won by being so aggressive in their condemnation of 50% of America?
No, and that's open to interpretation, but voters abhor the abstract, and that's what Biden's doing exactly wrong. This argument that Trump's a threat to democracy is not connecting with voters because they care about day-to-day issues. And look, it's absolutely true that Trump says dismissive, horrible things about veterans. He cut a very effective campaign ad to that effect today. It's true that he has flirted with authoritarianism. People do not care. That is what the polls are showing. They care about the economy, immigration. They care about check.
I was going to say the economy, immigration, crime, the economy.
Yeah, they feel less safe and less secure.
Okay, so Scott, I know how much you think that Donald Trump doesn't belong in the White House, right? We can agree on that.
Well, the empirical data and his own words say that. Up there.
Fair enough. We're not here to argue. We're not here to argue policy. We're here to argue the politics of it. Why, if Democrats are so concerned about Donald Trump, are they continuing to do something that didn't work for him in 2016, and the polling shows, if anything, it's hurting them now?
Well, it worked in 2020, which is why you have Biden. In 2024, these are facts based on empirical data and Donald Trump's own words. And so we've got to remind America and continue to remind them of who Donald Trump is, because sometimes we get amnesia as voters. But be that as it may, this election is also about abortion, about who Donald Trump is as a convicted felon. And then Biden's got to stand on his own vis-a-vis. He's got to own the economy. The difference, emotional disconnect.
Right. The difference, though, between 2020 and 2024 is that Joe Biden has a record to run on.
Yeah.
In 2020, there was no record. So you could say, hey, look, there's going to be no mean tweets, and I'm going to follow science, and I'm not going to talk about putting bleach in to kill the coronavirus, and things are going to be good. He also had a media that was a full cloth, all in for him. And there's a part of the media that still does not understand, a big part, Donald Trump or his supporters. We put the Quinnipiac poll up, 1 point gain, statistically really insignificant
right.
In terms of that. Brian Sullivan, CNBC, an accomplished journalist and a good anchor. He tweets out the verdict made more people likely to vote than not vote for him. Most don't care. Bonkers. And what I thought is, bonkers is what people who are deplorables and cling to their guns and religion do and act when they threaten democracy.
It's really a difference between what someone does and what they say. And voters have told us time and time again, and we poll them all the time, that they don't care what Donald Trump says. And he says a lot of offensive stuff. They care about the policies. They've seen Biden's policies. They seem to like Trump's better on all these things that are their priorities. So it's a very hard situation for Biden because he is being evaluated on his record, and it's crazy how well Trump is doing, considering all the problems Scott is very good at describing that he has.
So your polling, at least this particular polling, was about Republicans. Well, Donald Trump is baked in. And Donald Trump is right. He could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and his supporters would still be there. And so that's why the polling is what it is. It's the independents, it's the suburban voters, it's the women voters. Are they going to make a difference or not?
By the way, it wasn't Republicans, it was voters overall.
I thought I saw it was Republicans.
No, Quinnipiac, just Biden versus Trump.
Okay, well, it's still baked in. And the biggest issue for Donald Trump is he's stuck at that 45+%. Biden can grow, and the independents and the suburban voters and others have got to make a difference.
Right. I guess what I'm trying to say, though, is the plan to grow so far is by warning about Donald Trump. Those warnings are going unheeded. It's been very difficult, I think we can agree, for him to run on the economy. What's left? Where's he going to get a win?
The abortion. and what the GOP and Donald Trump are going to do to individual rights in this country. And if we pound that message, by the time we get to November, when the choice will be clear, there are only two choices here. I believe the Democrats believe that America, those independents, those suburban voters, are going to choose Biden over Trump because he's really the most viable, respectable choice.
All right. Lauren, is there a time when the arguments are laid out pretty clearly in June that somehow there's a 4 or 5 point shift when the underlying facts don't change?
We're in it. I think we're in that period. We are past the period where we should pay no attention to the polls and nobody's paying attention. People are starting to tune in. It's very unlikely that a macroeconomic trend is going to flip.
It's very hard to find something that's going to help Joe Biden between now and November. You can think of a lot of things that are going to hurt.
But Trump can always shoot himself in the foot. He's very good at doing that.
He does every day. And it hasn't made a difference.
No, it hasn't made a difference. Look, it is a common theme on this program. Never underestimate Republicans' ability to screw things up.
You happen to be right. I don't like to tell you
that. It's Friday. It's been a long week. Thank you both. It's been a lot of fun. Good to see you. All right.
Absolutely.
The new science showing how social media changes kids' brains. It does. So where are the parents? Mike Huckabee joins us with a little bit of parenting advice of his own. He raised some awfully good children. And later, money can buy big boats, big boats, fancy jets. Might even be able to buy you love. But can it buy you years? The new movement and the big money to live forever. Social media is literally rotting kids' minds. Really. According to a new study, internet addiction in young people leads to addictive behaviors. Here's why. It fires the synapses in your head when the kids aren't doing anything, while simultaneously slowing down their consciousness, their active thinking. And these changes in the brain have made kids then more susceptible to other bad addictive behavior. It's rewiring kids' brains from the screen and the algorithms, not to mention all the other issues. So maybe, just maybe, the problem with social media is behind the higher demand for Adderall, the 6% rise in young people seriously considering suicide in the last 10 years or so, the doubled rate of anxiety among kids, and the half of all teens who now say they're being bullied not only at school, but online, where you can't escape it when you come home. Former Arkansas governor and presidential candidate Mike Huckabee is here. I am old enough to remember when my parents told me no to lots of things, and I wasn't happy. But in the end, it was good for me that they told me no. And I'm wondering why parents now treat kids having social media like some right.
It's hard to understand, but it's dangerous. And what you've just pointed out is that studies are showing that social media can become not just a distraction, it becomes an addiction. And I don't use that word foolishly. I don't use it flippantly. It's a genuine addiction. People can't not be on a phone or a laptop or something. They're just connected to it. And it is rewiring people's brains. And when this happens to a young person whose brain is still in development, a young male's brain is developing up until and past 25 years old. So if you take a kid who's 6, 7, even 10 years old, and you get him hooked on the technology of a phone, he's going to be hardwired to a point by the time he's 25 that it's going to have a serious impact on that individual. So, you know, I'm watching states, Arkansas being one of them, where they're talking about saying that you can't have social media without parental supervision, until your later teen years. I know my own grandchildren aren't getting phones. Their parents won't let them, and I'm thrilled by that because it can be so dangerous to have stuff just poured into their heads and nobody really monitoring it.
Right. So when I was in high school, it was very, in vogue for kids to smoke pot or whatever. And my parents said, number one, absolutely not. But number two, you're not going to go hang out with kids who do. You're not going to go to parties where that behavior happens. And you said it, I think, best yourself just now. You said the parents, your children, who I know some of them have great regard for, just tell their kids no. Like, no, we are not getting you a phone that is then going to rewire your brain.
Well, I think a lot of parents are...
I guess my question is, though, why do we need laws when we should have parents do it rather than the government?
Well, it would be great if parents would do it. And I think the law is not intended to try to overparent. A parent can overrule that particular thing. But it's essentially because we have a lot of parents who have abdicated the role of being a parent. The job of a parent is not to be your child's best friend. It's to be a parent. It's to give them parameters of what's acceptable and appropriate behavior. And a parent who says, oh, I don't want to make my child mad at me, I got news for him. Your child will be far madder at you over time because you indulge them in everything than they will if you give them clear boundaries. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but quite frankly, children want boundaries. They want to know where are the limits. They will test them. They will push against them. They'll see how far they can go, what they can get away with. But deep down, every human being needs to know, wants to know, what can I do within the context of my life and be safe? And if a parent is going to try to be buddy-buddy instead of being faithful as a parent and saying no to some stuff, and I think what you said is exactly right, they're begging for trouble.
All right, teen media usage. 93% of teens use social media, 70% of teens addicted, 20% of teens are on it continuously. I don't know what continuously is defined as. 14% of high school students have contemplated suicide. Of that, half, 7%, have attempted suicide. And you have to think that a large number of those have been driven to these really dark places. And we see this, the social media algorithms push whatever it is that is sort of fueling their depression, their anxiety, whatever it is. Here's Lindsey Graham to Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook and Instagram.
Mr. Zuckerberg, you and the companies before us, I know you don't mean it to be so, but you have blood on your hands. You have a product. You have a product that's killing people.
We said that about cigarettes, right? The Surgeon General came out with the big warnings on and on and on. No parent would allow their kid to smoke, ever. Yeah. And I understand the idea from Republicans of we got to do something to save kids, but I think about the concept of limited government, the concept of Ronald Reagan, since we've been talking about him a lot in the documentaries this weekend, and yet there's not a push by Republicans of saying parents need to take responsibility. It's, hey, how can we score political points and run on that we senators are going to take the role of parents?
Yeah, I think Republicans need to be very balanced in this. And if whatever they propose, whatever they push, it ought to be to empower and to give parents a greater level of tools so that the parents can say, look, here are some realities and facts about the use and abuse of social media. And we're not going to let you just engage in social media anytime you want because it's not good for you. And even the government says so. The government can't come into your home and say, okay, let me take that phone out of your hand. None of us want that. I mean, that would be horrendous. I think it's a matter of somewhat desperation. When you see these numbers, and you know what Lindsey Graham said, it wasn't subtle to say to Zuckerberg, blood's on your hands. But the addictive nature of social media, and then it's the content. Some of it is bordering on pornographic, but a lot of it is just creating images for children that they can't handle. If they think that there's some kind of ideal, whether it's how they look or how they sound or what kind of material things they have, and those children don't live up to it, that's what leads to a lot of depression and a sense of worthlessness. That can, for some children, lead to these sense of desperation and even suicide. That's bad. I think we all agree.
No, we do all agree. I think your kids, raised by you, were probably on to the solution, which is no phones. You get a flip phone, you can call us. There you go. I don't know. I'm old-fashioned. You are as well. It's probably why we get along. Governor, it's good to see you. Wish you and the wife a nice few days away, and we'll talk soon, sir.
Thank you, Leland. Take care.
Yes, thank you. All right, we wrote about this a lot today in War Notes. That's our free newsletter. Comes out at 4:05 every day. Gives you our first thoughts on the most important stories of the day. You can reply. We read them all at Leland Vittert on Instagram and Twitter as well. Just make sure your kids aren't the ones interacting with us on social media. The irony of reading the teas right after Mike Huckabee. All right. Today, economists say hiring is up, and so are wages. So why aren't we all feeling it? We're asking for answers from the people who know, the ones that are living it. Next.
When I was in my 20s, rent was affordable, groceries was affordable, gas was affordable, housing was affordable. This is new. They are systematically pushing the middle class out.
The White House is celebrating another strong economic report. Job growth outpaced expectations in May. Trust me, we're going to get to the interesting part of this in a second. Hourly earnings rose as well, yet somehow there is a disconnect, obviously, with how people feel. 56% of Americans believe we're in a recession, even though we are objectively not. Full disclosure, I studied for a year at the London School of Economics, but tonight, rather than talking to an economist, we're going to talk to someone who understands everyday people, and we know that because 1 million people on Instagram and Twitter tune in to Freddie Smith for his thoughts about the economy and interact with him about actually what's happening. All right, Freddie, and I want to go through some of these numbers in terms of how people are looking at the world, right? 50+% say we're in a recession. 50+% think that the S&P 500 was down last year. It was not. It was up this year. 58% say the economy is getting worse. That's kind of sort of objective, but at the same time, it's not. By all objective measures, it's getting better. People keep feeling worse. Why is that?
I think it depends on the age of that study that was done or that poll that was done, because I think we're kind of living in two separate economies, if you will. Because if you're somebody who's over 60 years old, and this is what I'm seeing a lot, if your house is paid off and you don't have a big housing burden, if you have a $400,000 home and you have just property taxes and homeowner insurance for $600 a month, that is significantly better than a millennial or Gen Z are spending $2,500 for rent or $3,600 for a mortgage. So the housing's eating a lot of people's income. So I think people under 40 are really feeling the stress about the economy, saying it's not good because housing's up, college is up, daycare is through the roof. But I think people over 60 who sit back and go, my 401k is looking good, my house went up 40%, the economy's doing well, groceries are high, but we can deal. So I think it just depends on the age, because the millennials and Gen Zs are the ones really struggling.
Yeah, there's no question about that. You think about people whose house would be paid off now. They may have bought their house in the 1980s. Back then, the average home price was $22,000, and the median household income was $47,000. Now, the average home price is $420,000 and $77,000 for the median household income. So it makes sense why people who bought way back then are doing well. You talk a lot on TikTok and Instagram about this issue of inflation, that the working class keep getting crushed. And I'm feeling that there is a sense of hopelessness among a lot of people who are tuning into you, that becoming middle class in America and the middle class dream and which is the American dream, now feels completely unrealistic.
It really does, and that's why we're trying to bring hope. We're trying to find solutions, but this all just happened within the last 3 years. Well, when it comes to helping people out, it's working on a budget, working on a plan, it's paying off your debt, working a second job if you have to, and ultimately staying educated. Because we have to stay up on what's happening in the country right now so that we can get ahead. But we got to cut the millennials and Gen Z some slack, because this isn't ordinary. They are moving the goalposts so quickly on the middle class because of the housing. Even the slide you just brought up, someone making $77,000 cannot qualify for a $400,000 home. That's the first time that's ever happened in the past 50 years. So they're being forced to rent. It's eating up 50% of their income. So we just have to get people out of debt, working on skills, being educated, and really trying to raise their income, because that's going to be the quickest way. Holding your breath for the government to do something is not the first plan. That's like number 3. We have to do what we can individually first.
Yeah, I know you're right about that. Oddities in the job report: 8.3 million Americans working multiple jobs. That number is as high or as close to as high as it's ever been. 3.1 million Americans want a job but can't find one. And the number of full-time employees went down. And that working multiple jobs, I think, is the most important number because it speaks to how people feel like they just can't make ends meet. It's exactly what you were talking about. President Biden, for a number of times, has said that inflation when he took office was at 9%. It objectively was not. And his advisors have been asked about that a number of times. Take a listen.
So why does he keep misrepresenting this?
He's making the point that the factors that caused inflation to climb to 9% were in place when he took office.
No,
I think
that's
it was
not what he said. He said it was at 9%. It would eventually get to 9% a little over a year after that. But the fact of the matter is it wasn't 9%. So if I can't trust him quoting data in real time, why should I believe what he's talking about now?
Put the politics aside. I don't want to talk about it because this is how people feel. Is there anybody out there who's doing the Bill Clinton? I feel your pain.
Sadly, I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for someone to come in and address and just speak on it. I think we need to celebrate the good parts of the economy, but we also, it just seems like every politician's ignoring our youth. We just need we need a voice. We need someone to come in and make some drastic changes and give us some hope or a path forward. Instead of telling us everything is good, like give us some objective things to work towards and inspire the generation to continue to be creative because we're the most resourceful generation ever because we have access to all the information that we need.
I hear the voices of older folks in my head right now going, wait a second. Gen Z's the kids who all think they need the newest iPhone. They all want a car. They all want to go out every night. They want the latest tennis shoes. You got people who are wearing really expensive tennis shoes. YOLO, I'm going to Taylor Swift's concert, but I'm complaining I can't buy a house. Is that a fair critique?
I think that's fair for a percentage. I think there's definitely a percentage of millennials and Gen Zers who don't have a budget, and that's how they're going to dig themselves a hole. But I also think there's a large group of individuals who are working two jobs, living paycheck to paycheck. They're looking at this daunting debt going, I have $50,000 in debt. I got $87 left in my pocket. Do I go to lunch or the bar with my friends, or do I put this $87,000 towards my $50K? And it seems like this black hole. So there's a very fine line that the millennials and Gen Zs are walking, and they need to put a plan together to get out of that.
No, Freddie, it's obvious there's a reason why a million people listen to you. You make a lot of sense. Thank you. We'll have you back. People care about this, as we know. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you as well.
Hunter Biden was back in court today as the prosecution wrapped up its case. 54-year-old is facing felony gun charges, and one fixture in the court this week has been his stepmother, our First Lady, Jill Biden. On Monday, Jill Biden spent her 73rd birthday in court supporting her stepson, Hunter, and there is a nobility to a mother being there, granted. On Tuesday, she sat in court. Several pictures of Hunter using drugs and even sitting in a bathtub were shown. Pictures she reportedly didn't even look at. Understandable. On Wednesday, she arrived with her sister before jetting off to Paris to be at the president's side to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Less than 24 hours later, the First Lady boarded a military aircraft from Paris to fly 3,600 miles back to the United States to be back in court today for Hunter. There's a reason there was no media coverage of that. And she's expected to fly those 3,600 miles back to France overnight tonight for a state visit on Saturday. The New York Times put it this way. Jill Biden, a fierce protector of Hunter Biden, leaves France for Wilmington. CNN writes, Jill Biden, a fixture at Hunter Biden's trial, juggles role as First Lady and mom. I love my mom. I love everything she does for me. But as MSNBC put it today, the Biden family is already turning out en masse for Hunter Biden.
Biden family and friends took up 2.5 rows in the courtroom gallery behind the defense table. And as we mentioned at the top, that includes Jill Biden. Let's not forget, besides just now flying back from France, she spent a good chunk of her birthday with him at the start of this trial.
So the entire family is there, partly probably because they love Hunter, sure. This isn't Hunter's darkest moment. That was when he was smoking crack every 2 hours and blowing tens of thousands of dollars on hookers. This is Hunter Biden's darkest public moment. And Delaware's royal family, literally the royal family, is there to support him. So why do they need the First Lady? She's flying some 7,000 miles by jet to Wilmington, Delaware, from France back to France for a single day in court, when her husband has lauded climate change as the single biggest threat to humanity.
Climate action offers an opportunity for the nation to come together and do some really big things. You know, I've seen firsthand what the reports make clear: the devastating toll of climate change and its existential threat to all of us, and is the ultimate threat to humanity.
Okay. Meanwhile, his father, Hunter's father, the most powerful man in the nation, is overseas right now, telling his son that he won't help him.
As we sit here in Normandy, your son Hunter is on trial, and I know that you cannot speak about an ongoing federal prosecution. But let me ask you, will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
So even if Hunter's convicted, he won't go to jail. Community service, something like that, suspended sentence. Hunter's 54 and married. No reasonable person really thinks the gun charge is anything more than a politically motivated tit for tat. So Democrats can say nobody is above the law. So President Biden can say, yes, I'll accept the jury's verdict. Fair enough. But an acquittal of Hunter Biden would be a political gold. It would be solid gold for Team Biden. The First Lady of the United States in her home state's courthouse, surrounded by Secret Service agents, sends one heck of a message to the jury every day. The climate, well, that's for other people to worry about. The final leg of horse racing's Triple Crown happens tomorrow with the Belmont Stakes. Millions of bets will be placed, but with so many sports to bet on these days, is it possible to save horse racing? Is post time. I bet you didn't know that. Horse racing isn't close to what it used to be. Sports betting's exploded. People bet $120 billion last year. It's up nearly 30%. But according to Equibase, last year the amount of bets on horse races nationwide was down 500 million, and the number of races dropped by 2,000. With us now, Dave Grenning, New York correspondent for Daily Racing Forum. Good to see you. Welcome back. All right, Dave. Horse racing, as we know it, going to be around in 10 years?
Not as we know it. I think there'll be fewer tracks and probably fewer days. A lot of the smaller tracks probably just of attrition will probably have to either scale back dramatically or just go out of business. Like in New York alone, we're going to probably lose Aqueduct in the next couple of years. There's a big renovation at Belmont Park going on. That's why we're at Saratoga for this year's Belmont Stakes and next year's Belmont Stakes. And by 2027, Aqueduct won't be around. It's like track like Laurel Park won't be around because they'll condense all the racing at Pimlico. So there'll be a lot fewer tracks in 10 years.
Wow. I didn't know that. And thank you for letting us know. States with online sports betting, there's a lot of them. California isn't in there, but Florida is. Texas has active legislation. Much of the East Coast does. You're talking about a lot of places to bet. And this is what I think is interesting. We just looked at FanDuel. I created an account to be able to do this. I'd never bet on sports before. Aussie rugby, cricket, cycling, darts, and water polo are all things you can bet on online. Are we realizing that so much of the enthusiasm about horse racing wasn't necessarily about the ponies, but was about the betting?
That's fair. That's true. People like to gamble, which is why I think horse racing will still be around, say, in 10 years, because of the salacious appetite for gambling. And racing, when you're at a racetrack, you don't have to just bet on the track that you're at. You can, bet on simulcast racing, bet on a race. I'm sitting in New York. I can bet on California. I can bet on Kentucky. I can bet on Florida, bet on Delaware. So there's a constant action going on in racing where if you're betting a football game, it's a three hour until you know if you won or lost. Now, granted, you can bet in game, but you can also, there's a lot of races to bet, so you're going to get a lot more actual.
Is there going to be pressure on racetracks to elevate the experience, right? We're looking at the races, all the really famous races at the fancy tracks with everybody in the big hats and dresses and everything else. Is there going to be pressure to make it even more elegant and to make it more about the experience and going to the track because the novelty of betting just isn't there?
Well, the tracks are switching to the bigger days. Like we're having what they're calling a festival here, a 4-day Belmont Stakes racing festival with 27 stakes races spread out and sprinkled in with all the other races over 4 days. And you're getting that's the thing now. It's the big event, the Breeders' Cup, the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, the Belmont Stakes, Saratoga and Del Mar in Southern California have their major days. So it's really about a big event day.
Got it. All right. This is amazing. Dave, thank you. Look, I hope racing's around for you guys because it nothing lasts forever, but it's I feel like it's so built into American society. It's good to see you. Thank you very much. Living longer is no longer, for sure. Living longer, hey, maybe you live until the end of horse racing. Living longer is no longer just about diet and exercise. Some are going to extremes to delay, even conquer death. Up next, Peter Diamandis spending $120,000 a year to stay young. So can this guy live forever? We'll see in a minute. Ben Franklin said there are only two certainties in life: death and taxes. The super rich, well, practically have taxes beat, right? Warren Buffett loves to say he pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. So now the richest of the rich want to cheat death too. The LA Times quote from a story: "Can money conquer death? How wealthy people are trying to live forever." Peter Diamandis, a week away from turning 63, bounds out of a Starbucks on a recent morning with a cup of decaf, his daily medley of 70 supplement capsules in his pocket, and tucked under his left arm, a box of freshly deposited bodily things that he's going to have tested. We definitely have questions. Peter is with us. He's founder of HealthSpan and author of Longevity, Your Practical Playbook. I saw you smile when I said, are you going to live forever? So we'll start there. Is that the idea?
The idea is to live a long and healthy life and have the vitality and love it, right? There is so much tech that's driving this. There are incredible breakthroughs in diagnostics and therapeutics. You know, every year I bring together a group of 40 wealthy individuals. These are family offices, venture capitalists, in what I call a longevity platinum trip. And we visit the top researchers, the top labs, the top entrepreneurs. It's $1 trillion industry. The most wealth ever will be created, but it's also the greatest gift you can give humanity, right? I'm not talking about being drooling in a wheelchair at age 150. It's how long can you have the vitality and the energy and feel great? So this Platinum Trip is where I go and I find the top breakthroughs and I make them available to myself, my venture fund, my companies. There's a lot going on.
Look, I admire your being honest and saying, like, hey, this is a money-making venture. And I guess in a way you're the guinea pig, right? Because you're doing all this stuff. Harvard CDC Congressional Budget Office lifespan from the 1990s. 1947, the average lifespan was 47 years. 2024, it's now 80 years. And I think you make a very good point. And a good buddy of mine does. Maybe it's California. He lives in California, too. He says that it is not about quantity. It's about quality. And look, California is good for you. You look much younger than 63 years old. But the amount of money that you were throwing around here, billions of dollars, and some of the most wealthy people in America, in the world, on and on and on, does this end up being like yachts that only the super rich are able to indulge, or do we get to a point where normal folks can replace going out to eat a couple nights a month, and that is their ticket to this substantially better, healthier life?
Yeah. I mean, there's two things. First of all, there's a lot of things you can do right now that don't cost you anything in the form of sleep and diet and exercise. If you go to diamandis.com/longevity, you can get a copy of this book for free, and you can learn about that. On the flip side, you know, there are companies like Cellularity that is doing stem cell banking and stem cell supplementation and natural killer cells and Immunis and Gamito. There's all of these companies that are being heavily invested because it's going to be, like I said, it's the biggest financial return. It's the biggest marketplace. But it's also, if you think about it, what gift could you give anybody? It's the greatest benefit we can give humanity. Things in the beginning, when they don't work well, they're expensive and they're paid for by the wealthy, like the cell phone. But by the time they work extremely well, they're cheap and available to everybody. The same thing's going to be happening here. My job is to find
So how
the
do you
top
see?
companies.
I saw this picture that we put up. I don't know if we put it up again. You were laying there like this with your arms out in the LA Times article. There it is. Okay. The LA Times article talked about how you were getting your plasma replaced in everything. On the margin here.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the margin here between eating right, you're going to feel better. Not drinking, fine. You're going to be better. Sleep more, you're going to feel better. I always ask everybody who comes in, all the politicians in Washington have those Oura rings that they wear that tells you, how well you slept and your heart rate and everything else. I said, has your Oura ring ever told you anything other than don't drink and sleep more? And to a T, all of them go, how'd you know? No, it's what it always tells me. What's the marginal gain to getting your plasma replaced?
Yeah, so the basics, again, sleep, diet, exercise, even mindset, critically important. These things are going to buy us the next decade of life. But if you want to get to 100, 120, 150, this is going to be driven by science, right? This is why this longevity platinum trip, my investors and family offices come to learn about these companies, to figure out where they can invest in them, and actually the CRISPR and gene therapy companies are coming. There's breakthroughs that are on the edge, and they're going to transform how long we can live a healthy life.
All right, Peter, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Cheers to a long and healthy and happy life. We'll talk to you soon. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.
Boy, has it been an interesting week for all of us. I end every show on Friday night by saying, spend some time with people you love. Don't talk about politics. I'll be doing that with my father on the golf course. And also spend some time thinking about D-Day, especially if you had a grandfather who fought in World War II. Those memories are worth holding on to. Here's Chris.